From Flushing to the boroughs, the faithful tune in. Gary Mack's in the booth, let the musings begin. Orange and blue, through the highs and the lows, breaking down every pitch, cause that's how it goes. It's MetsMusings, where the stories ignite. A recap, a rant, and a Saturday night. Stats and passion, a voice fans trust. All for the team that's forever with us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mets Musings. Not a lot going on as we tumble our way through the playoffs, and now we are down to two teams: Toronto Blue Jays versus the LA Dodgers. And boy, weren't the Milwaukee Brewers and the Philadelphia Phillies a big disappointment, falling to the Dodgers like that? Uh, Barely put up a fight, and really were not impressed with those two teams at all. And of course, the Phillies are going to have some questions in the offseason with the free agents that they're going to be either losing or that they'll have to sign as we go on throughout the winter in the hot stove. But we shall see. Toronto looks pretty good, but who knows what's going to happen with that. So let's see if there's any Mets news. There is some small Mets news. The Mets promoted Jeff Albert to run their hitting program, putting him in charge of what they hope can be one of the league's top offenses. The team still intends to hire at least one hitting coach to serve under Albert. In addition, the Mets hired Kai Correa to serve as their bench coach under manager Carlos Mendoza. Now, Correa first appeared on a major league coaching staff as a 31-year-old under Gabe Kapler in San Francisco in 2020. 3 years later, briefly served as interim manager for the Giants after they fired Kapler. The Hawaiian native never played professionally, but he boasts a decade and a half of coaching experience in the professional and collegiate ranks. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch as the season goes on. So, and as we said, Jeff Albert being promoted to run their hitting program. Not so sure what that means, but he did oversee last year a breakout season from Carson Bange, the number 2 ranked prospect for the Mets. So that's the news so far. Mets pitcher David Peterson and catcher Luis Torrens are finalists at their positions for the 2025 MLB Gold Glove Awards. The finalists were announced by Rawlings, and Peterson's competitors for the award are Matthew Boyd of the Cubs and Logan Webb of the Giants. Torrens' competitors are Carson Kelly of the Cubs and Patrick Bailey of the Giants. Torrens was truly elite behind the plate this season. He was in the 100th percentile when it came to caught stealing above average, 97th percentile in pop time, and 82nd percentile in framing. The only area of his defensive game that was a little bit below average was blocking pitches. So the last Met to win a Gold Glove was Juan Lagares, who took home the award for the performance in center field in 2014. And that is what we have for Mets news. But do not go away empty-handed. We have a terrific interview today. And I am excited about it, and I hope you will enjoy it as much as I enjoy doing it. So without further ado, let us go to the interview. We are back, and I am so excited, not only because this is my 600th episode, but I have a very special guest on today, and her name is Laura Albanese, and she is the beat writer for Newsday. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Laura, I guess you're sick of the question by now of what went wrong with this team, but I have to ask. We pretty much know what it was: the pitching, untimely hitting. But just give us a quick recap of what you feel was the problem with the team.
I mean, I think it was really multifaceted because, I mean, we've heard it time and time again. It wasn't like there wasn't talent on the roster. Of course, there was talent on the roster. But you were kind of dealing with an unbalanced roster, especially towards the latter half of the season. So it was very top heavy. And then you get to the bottom of the lineup, and suddenly the production really waned. And we talked about the pitching a lot, the run prevention a lot. The short outings by starting pitchers, we said it time and time and time again, it really sunk them. But it sunk them for more reasons than I think people understand sometimes. It's not just that they were getting into these early deficits. It was that you could literally see the at-bats getting worse the minute that they would get behind. So suddenly guys are missing pitches to hit. They would get behind in counts. There would be an unfavorable counts. They're trying to do too much because everybody had all these expectations on them that this was going to be the
Right.
team. And they just started pressing. And then the defense wasn't good to begin with. But when you have one, contact heavy pitchers, and two, you're constantly trying to work out of a deficit, suddenly the mental mistakes just start adding on. And even guys who are good defenders were making mistakes that generally they didn't make in their careers. And I'm sure as fans watching it, it was extremely frustrating to watch.
Oh, it certainly was, and it's got to be frustrating a little bit for you too, because you see this, you're around the team every day, and you see these things happening. But how would you describe like the clubhouse culture? I mean, compared to last season it seemed to be more of a more cohesive group than this year. And this year, I don't know, it just seemed to be something missing this year. I mean, did you notice that same kind of thing? And or is it just something that's hard to put a finger on?
I think you're onto something there, and like it's a again, it's complicated because it's not like these weren't good guys. I would have to say, walking into the clubhouse, these guys did like each other. They did have that kind of like camaraderie, but it was 100% different from last year. And I think there are a few factors involved here. The first being that last year's team didn't really have any expectations on it. And so it was easier to play loose because you're essentially playing with house money. And when you're playing
Right.
loose, you can joke around a little bit more. You can kind of like have fun a little bit more. This year they came in and it was a good thing. They came in with a mission. They're like, we have to get this done now. We have Juan Soto, we have this payroll, we have the pieces in place.
Right.
And, as good and as much as you want your team to be that way, sometimes it can kind of like tighten things up a little bit. So I would consider the clubhouse culture, it wasn't bad. It was just very like business-like. Like get in, do the job. And then when things started to go poorly, it was just more like, okay, we have to fix this. We have to fix this now. What's going on? And
Yeah.
that kind of thing sort of takes over sometimes. People talk a lot about chemistry. It is easy to have chemistry when you're winning. It is very hard to have chemistry when you're losing. Just that's just the name of the game.
That's a good
So
point.
like sometimes I would go on Twitter and people be like, "This guy's a clubhouse cancer," and this guy's. I'm like, no, they're not. It's just not working the way it used to.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk early in the season, especially about Juan Soto being not so much disruptive, but just didn't seem to mesh. But you didn't see any of that kind of thing at all.
Juan Soto is shy. That's it. He's not.
Okay.
He's more of an introverted type. He has like a very sort of like low-key sarcastic sense of humor.
Hmm.
But even in the beginning, it wasn't that he was trying to grandstand, nothing like that at all. It was more like Starling Marte had to kind of put his hand around him and be like, you know how an extrovert adopts an introvert sometimes? It was one of those situations. So no, like I didn't see that at all. Sure, was he on the quieter side? Absolutely. But he was on the quieter side when he was on the Yankees too. It was more a question of, getting comfortable in your surroundings. Maybe I felt it a little bit too much because I'm an introvert myself, so it takes me a little bit to like kind of warm up to new scenarios. But you did really start to see his personality emerge. So no, it wasn't like, oh my God, this guy is bad for the clubhouse. It was more like this guy kind of keeps to himself a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and then we as fans take it in a different direction, I guess, because especially with social media is like, I mean, it's horrible, really, towards the things I've read, about Mendoza and this guy and that guy and Stearns and it's just ridiculous. You got to give these guys a chance. I mean, the worst thing you can do is start firing everybody and bringing in new managers and stuff. I mean, I know they did it with the coaches, but it's just it doesn't always work. And it's sort of like the bullpen and the pitching staff. Now, when we came into the season, the pitching staff, the starting staff was a big question mark.
Yeah.
The bullpen seemed to be fairly steady. David Stern made some good acquisitions over the winter. I thought with AJ Minter and we had Nunez coming back, and unfortunately we have more Tommy John surgeries this year. Like, I mean, it's incredible the
It's
amount of
insane.
injuries. The bullpen.
That was such a big, that was a big thing. The way that this rotation was going to work, honestly, it felt like the only way the rotation was going to work sustainably was if the bullpen was there to be a lockdown unit. AJ Minter got hurt so early in the season that I think sometimes people forget what a big blow that was. Not having
Right.
that absolutely, locked down back end. And, a lot of different things happen. Now you do have to look at, the Mets have a lot of injuries to their pitching staff. And sometimes it's just bad luck, but sometimes you do have to look at how are we conditioning these guys? What's going on in the pitching lab? Now Jeremy Hefner is not going to be part of that anymore. Is it going to be an overuse issue? Like, what is going on? What is happening? Um, because I mean, having that many guys go down with Tommy John surgery, and then having Kranick with the flexor strain, and then having obviously Minter out for the season, and then there were the freak injuries too. Griffin Canning freak injury, Kodai Senga freak
Oh,
injury.
that was a
Like
killer.
it was like all this stuff coming together. And while I very much understood David Stern's approach to building that pitching staff, it really did underline the need of a frontline guy who one can
Hmm.
stay healthy and two can play stopper.
Well, his ideas, I guess, are different than everybody else, and it's worked in Milwaukee, and he's tried to make it work. It worked somewhat here. It worked the first year
Yeah.
with Mania, bringing in Mania, and it didn't work with Montas this year, and of course Mania got hurt, and as you said, Griffin Canning. I think that was almost like the final the knife in the back for them, because they were holding their own more or less, and then once he went down, that kind of just sent everything spinning out of control. But
Yeah.
we saw the midseason break before the trade deadline, and David Stearns made some. I thought they were excellent trades on paper, of
So did
course.
everybody. Like, let's be real here.
And they just didn't work out. I mean, you can never tell. I mean, it was such a Soto had some good times. Helmsley was terrible until really the end.
Yeah, he looked really
Um,
good for his last six outings. And then,
yeah, when everything was slipping away,
yeah,
and now we lost Reed Garrett this year. He was up and down all year, but
yeah.
now we lost him next year. So, um, where do the Mets go from here? I mean, obviously, you did mention a front line starter. They have to look for that. They got to rebuild the whole bullpen because the whole bullpen's leaving just about.
Yep.
Um, what's your thoughts on will they sign Diaz, do you think?
Man, they should. I mean, just talking to people, not necessarily in the organization, but around baseball. And even, like even when Diaz first got hurt in the World Baseball Classic, I remember talking to people inside the organization uh, towards the latter end of that season. And more than one person said, when Diaz got hurt, we knew we were in big trouble.
Mhm.
So not having Edwin Diaz back, I think, is a risk that the Mets can't necessarily take. I understand that he's going to cost a lot. I understand that, you're going to get him as he's getting older, but the Diaz that we saw this year was vintage Diaz, and the Mets would have been in a far, far worse position, if you can imagine it,
Yeah,
without
yeah,
Edwin Diaz there. And other than, the World Baseball Classic, he's more or less stayed healthy. And I
that's
think
true.
that is so, so valuable. And then you build the rest of the bullpen out from there. Because we saw so many times toward the latter end of the season, the circle of trust with the bullpen was increasingly tiny to the point where
Hmm.
it felt like Diaz was the only one at times that you could really trust. Like there were so many times people would be like, "Oh, why is Carlos Mendoza putting in Tyler Rogers with men on base?" And I was one of them. I'm like, he does not pitch well. He's a contact pitcher. He pitches well with the bases empty. But then you look around, like, what other options do you have? You're gonna throw in Ryan Stanek, who has like a 5 ERA this month.
Right.
You're gonna throw in Huascar Brazaban for another 3 innings until his arm falls off one more time. Like, what else can you do?
So, what thoughts do you have on that of who they may bring back? Now, Brooks Raley, I think, is a guy
A
that was
lot, I think.
consistent when he came back. He should come back. I see a lot of people. It's really funny. The social media. I see a lot of people talking about bringing back Helmsley, and I'm thinking,
I wouldn't be opposed to that.
why?
Believe it or not, I would not be opposed to that. And I know, and you could get the pitchforks ready. I'm ready to take the heat. Um, I would not be opposed to that because one of the things, and I had talked to Helsley towards the tail end of the season, and he was obviously very, very aware of what was going on.
Hmm.
And he was like, for the one thing, tipping the pitches. The other thing, I don't care if you throw 101 miles per hour, if you throw it straight down the gullet, guys are going to hit it. So that
Yeah.
was another issue. So pitch selection was another issue. And a lot of it, and he was very honest with this, he was just like, just not only acclimating to a new team after being with the Cardinals for so long, but acclimating to a new role. And I thought it was kind of gutsy. And I think it showed that he's willing and able to adapt. The fact that he was able to turn it around essentially when the Mets needed him the most. At this point, I'm also thinking that Helsley's going to be pretty cheap. Uh, because I feel like he took some body shots towards the tail end of that season, and I think they
Right.
could probably get him for a reasonable amount of money, and then kind of go from there. So
Okay.
while he's definitely not priority one, do I pass out and like start like freaking out if they bring Helsley back? Not really. Like I'm like, okay, he still has it. He just didn't stop learning. He just didn't stop knowing how to
Right.
pitch.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't hate it. I don't hate it.
And I don't know, who they've got in the minors that could really in a bullpen situation other than they talk about Dylan Ross, but he's got issues with control issues. I mean, he throws 100 miles an hour, but sometimes you don't know where it's going to go.
I don't love the idea of having a young kid come up with control issues and putting him in high leverage situations like that. I think that can be a very dangerous game to play. Um, you know, I'm looking at right now like who's available. Yeah, man, believe it or not. So I'm looking at the relief pitcher options. So you got Robert Suarez, he's going to cost a lot, 35 years old. Raisel Iglesias, he's going to cost a lot. Um, Andres Munoz, he has a club option, which the Mariners are almost absolutely going to exercise. And then the next best reliever based on WAR is Ryan Helsley,
Okay.
unless you want the one after that, who's Devin Williams. So,
Oh, yeah.
so
Another
I mean, the options
project.
are not great.
Yeah.
I actually wouldn't hate Brandon Sproat out of the bullpen, believe it or not.
Yeah,
Um,
that would be.
he can throw in the triple digits. We saw his velocity tick down
Right.
as he headed
Right.
into like the fourth and fifth inning. We saw his effectiveness tick down a few times around the order, but that sure doesn't matter if you're only pitching an inning,
An
maybe
inning or two.
an inning
Yeah.
and a half, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that could be effective.
And what about the thought of possibly moving Clay Holmes back to the bullpen? I mean, he was a closer all those years. He did a great job as the starter this year. But if you could trade or sign a couple of top line or one top line starter, would that be a consideration that they would look into at all? Do you think?
I'm sure they're looking into all the options. I feel like Clay Holmes is more valuable as a starter. He's proven his durability. The fact that he added all these extra pitches, I think, is good. And frankly, I think we have not seen, I think we saw Clay Holmes adapting to a new role. I think he takes another step next year. I think he gets better.
Okay.
He learned a lot from this experience. And the one thing,
Yeah.
because before I covered the Mets full time as a beat writer, I covered the Yankees a lot. So I know Clay Holmes very well, just in
Right.
terms of who he is as a pitcher. And the one thing that always struck me with Holmes is he's a studier. He's a guy who's always trying to get better and learn more. And I think he's going to be spending this offseason doing even more of that and
Mm-hmm.
optimizing. So, I mean, when you're looking at their options in the rotation, I mean, Clay Holmes was their steadiest guy in the second half. It wasn't like Nolan McLean. And Nolan
Right.
McLean shouldn't have been put in that position in the first place. He just happened to do
Right.
really, really
Right.
well.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Uh, Carlos Mendoza, thoughts on him? Some people said, well, he didn't handle the bullpen well and everything, but he didn't have, as we said before, his circle of trust got smaller and smaller. And let's face it, the starters didn't go long enough. So
Yeah.
Mendoza, he'll be having a different coaching staff. How do you think that'll affect him and the job that he did?
I mean, I think Carlos Mendoza kept things as steady as he could, given the situation. I definitely questioned some of his bullpen decisions, as we all did.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
but one thing that I've learned over the years is one, the managers don't always make those calls, and two, a
right,
lot of
right,
times, you know, it is easy to criticize, and we have every right to criticize, but it's hard to know the full story. We don't know if someone's hurt or if something's going on or like, because especially towards the end, it felt like somebody. I was talking to Helsley about this because we were talking about like, he's like, nobody in this bullpen is 100% healthy at the end of the year. That's just the nature of bullpens. That's just the nature of like the situation. And so, you'd go in and you talk to Mendoza pregame. And he'd have to be a little bit coy. We're like, oh, is this guy available? Is this guy available? And of course, he can't say who is who or who isn't because that just gives the other team an advantage. But you
right,
got the sense that he was really kind of working with like one hand tied behind his back. That doesn't excuse because at the end the buck stops with him. Whatever
right,
happens,
right.
happens. I think this is going to be a big year for him as a manager, in terms of establishing who he is because so many of the coaches that he had, he inherited. So now he's essentially building his staff from scratch. Um, and possibly since this is going to be, now he has his third year, possibly going to have a little bit more autonomy in terms of the decisions that he's making because this is
Mm-hmm.
his club now. So
Right,
it's
right.
going to be interesting to see. That there were times towards the end of the year where we would ask him like, okay, so obviously pitchers are making adjustments like in mid innings, and your offense, which is full of these very talented hitters, they're not making adjustments back. And he said, well,
Right,
it could be like, we have the information. And so it was like, if you have the information, is there a communication issue?
right,
Were the coaches a factor there?
right.
So now, there can be no more excuses. That's it. It's done.
Yeah, that's it. The big question of the winter is going to be like last winter, I guess. Does Pete sign or does he not? He wants 7 years.
7 years
Two
is pushing it.
ten.
I think 7 years is Scott Boris
It's
asking for the moon.
yeah,
Um,
of course.
I don't know. Everyone asked that. I don't know. Um, I think it's going to be, I think this year's negotiations, my gut feeling, are going to be testier than last year's. And last year's
Hmm.
were already pretty tense. Um,
Right.
just because last year, it was almost like they were playing a game of chicken. And Pete wanted to come back so bad and have his shot because he thought, as many people did, this was the chance to really to go all the way. And so he took a very team-friendly contract, even though the AAV was high. This coming year, at the end of the season, he said two things. One, I want to win. So if he thinks that for some reason this club is built in a way to not win, that's going to be a
Hmm.
problem. And two, I hope they appreciate me as much as I appreciate them. And in baseball and in free agency, you show appreciation by giving people money. So it's the thing is, I think Pete is in a better position in terms of, just kind of like bargaining power than he was last year because the first base free agent class isn't great. Ryan Clifford, who's the Mets first base prospect, don't know if he's ready yet. Certainly don't want to like throw
Hmm.
him in there right away. And then the other options that people are throwing around are again platooning Vientos and McNeil until Clifford is ready. And for all this, you're giving up 38 home runs, 126 RBIs, and a guy who plays 162 games. That's that he's got a good amount of bargaining power here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
if they can compromise and get him down to probably like 5 years, maybe Pete can push it to 6. I know that's not what the Mets necessarily want to do, but it might have to be what they do.
Right. Right. Well, maybe 5 years and an option, even.
Something like that, like
Something.
if you give him 5 years and a club option or, like 5 year, I think Pete would be willing to massage things a little bit to come back
Hmm.
to Flushing because of his legacy here. I think he'd be willing to take maybe a little bit less because of what he's been able to do, franchise leader in home runs, everything else. But I don't think he's gonna like bail out like he did last year. And he was like, okay, he had too good of a year for that.
Right. Right. Um, any players that you see that will not be with the team this year? Who do you think they could possibly trade, or who do you think they would try to trade? Let's put it that way.
I can see them trying to move Vientos. I mean, if you're going to focus on run prevention, which David Stern said he would, then Vientos does not fit that category necessarily. Um, Other than that, like people are like, well, what about Brandon Nimmo? No one's going to take that contract.
Right.
Or if they will, the Mets would have to eat a significant amount of money. I kind of think like the Jeff McNeil stuff is hogwash because he provides more value than the fan. I understand the fans are frustrated with him, but his contract is team friendly. He can play anywhere on the field. He can still give you a decent at bat, even though he had a really, really crappy September. And no one's saying he didn't. But for the first half of the season, he led the team, or it was on top
Hmm.
three of the team in OPS.
Right.
So there are 100% teams that would want Jeff McNeil and would probably give something decent for him. But to have a guy who can reliably play second base, sometimes third base, center field, left field, I mean, like first base probably, like wherever, and still give you a decent at bat, there's value there that I think people don't understand.
Right.
So, other than that, they don't have too much leeway. I could see Acuna going. Like I could even see like Ronnie Mauricio going if the Tigers were really willing to deal Tariq Skubal. If the Pirates somehow decide, hey, you want to know what Paul Skeens, here you go, then forget it. Everybody's on the table. Like, I don't. If your name is not Juan Soto or Francisco Lindor, see,
Yeah. You mentioned Tarek Skubal. Um, there's the possibility. Apparently, the Tigers and him are way off on contract negotiations. He is a Boris guy, though. So,
yeah, he's gonna be pricey too.
that's. Do we want another Boris?
Well,
Well,
that's
I
the
mean, I'll
thing.
take him, but
And there's so many factors involved too, because it's just like there might be a lockout in 2027. So let's say
yeah,
you trade
that's
for him and you sign him to this huge extension, and suddenly there's not baseball, and you don't know when baseball's going to come back.
right.
And
Right.
there are layers upon layers to this. And yeah, having a roster full of Boris clients is not easy for
Okay.
an owner.
I saw a rumor today about Kettle Marte
Mhm.
from Arizona. People talking about the Mets to trade him. He would be open for a trade, apparently. Um, any thoughts on something like that? But then you lock down second base. So then, you know, uh, where do you play Acuna if you keep him? Where do
I
you
don't know that
play?
you play Acuna. He seems like at this point, Acuna is, when I say Acuna is frustrating, I don't mean that the player himself is frustrating. I mean that how they handled his development has been frustrating.
Right,
So we
right,
still don't know what we have in this kid, other than the fact that he's really fast and he's a great defensive replacement. Like
right.
it, what do you do there? second base is also Brett Beatty's, like he could play second base as well. At this point, you need Brett Beatty in the lineup one way or another. So you either get a second baseman or you get a third baseman or
Right.
like, and there are times where you do want Jeff McNeil's bat in there because of the versatility, depending on who the pitcher is. So I think they do at one point have to really consider how they play their young guys. And that is the thing with this team. Playing the young guys is great. I think it's really important to kind of develop that talent. But usually when you have top tier prospects, they're not all being like thrown in there at once and being tasked to basically save the bottom of your lineup. And
Hmm.
it can be difficult for development. I mean, I look at a guy like Ronnie Mauricio who missed a year of baseball, gets into AAA, Mark Vientos gets hurt. Suddenly he's thrown into the mix with basically having played barely, like a third of the AAA season. And then he's essentially benched for the last month of the year. So we see him sporadically. And then what happens? Brett Beatty gets hurt. Biggest game of the year. You got a kid who's barely played anything, and now he has to
Right.
start. And it just seems like an unfair position to be put in.
I think that I feel the same way about Mauricio. I think they handicapped him so much this year. He should have been playing at AAA. They should have never brought him up when Vientos got hurt. Um, because I think now it was an option thing, is what I believe. I read that that's why they had to keep him up here, right? He's out of options. They couldn't send him back down.
I don't know that he was out
Uh,
of options, but like, yeah, I would have to check. But
yeah,
it was a tough situation for a lot of these young kids. And I remember, at the end of like a season press conference, I did ask David Stearns, I'm like, you look at Mauricio, you look at Jonah Tong, who that kid was dealt a raw hand. I'm sorry, one way or another, he
yeah,
was dealt a raw hand. And you're like, do you think it hurts their development? Because for years we've been like, well, we don't want to rush this guy up because it might hurt his development, hurt his development, hurt his development. And then you rush these two guys up in ways that could absolutely hurt their development. Imagine being Jonah Tong, having two AAA games under your belt, and understandably, you get to the major leagues and you get smacked around a little bit. You're only 22
yeah,
years old. The
yeah,
kid is resilient, which is great. But I mean, that does take a mental toll. And so
yeah,
you have to
yeah.
wonder, like, how does that factor in? So I mean, we will see. I understand that the Mets want to like build a roster organically and develop from within, but you do need a balance there. You can't just be relying on all these young guys, a lot of them playing out of position or being put in uncomfortable situations. Like, oh, guess what? You haven't had an at bat in 3 days, and you're the pinch hitter with like the tying run, at second base,
Yeah.
and we haven't come from behind since like 1999. Like, come on.
Yeah, yeah. Any thoughts on who they would? Do you think they will make a splash in the free agent market? Not counting Diaz or Alonso, will they go after a top line starter? I mean, Frambo Valdez is there. Uh, I don't know if Dylan Cease would be much. But they might be able to get him on a cheap. Well, not cheap, but
Cheap enough, yeah. I
cheap
mean,
enough.
I can see it. Like Stearns has said that they're gonna look at all options. They're not gonna fully reevaluate their philosophy of developing from within. I think if it's possible, it's more likely that they maybe try to attempt to get a frontline starter via the trade market. But yeah, Dylan Cease, a Ranger Suarez, might be good.
Yeah,
I mean, the thing is, it's just you, you know what I'd like? I'd like to see a Michael King. I think that could be fun. He has a mutual option. Um, Maybe a Zach Gallen. I think that
yeah,
could be good. When I look at the free agents, I don't necessarily think he's gonna go top tier. He might,
right.
but like kind of like that second wave of like reliably good. Like kind of have that instead of like,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah.
this guy, if we tweak this and we do this and we do this. I'm all for like optimization and pitching lab and blah blah blah, but sometimes when you tweak too much, that's how guys get hurt. That's how
Do
you
you
start messing around.
bring back a Griffin Canning at all?
I mean, I thought he was I thought I was
I
impressed with him. I thought
Yeah,
he was very stable. He was surprising. I mean, for us to
Yeah.
say, could you imagine when they signed Griffin Canning? For us to be like 1 year later going, man, if Griffin Canning didn't get hurt, the Mets would be in a better position. Oh no.
Yeah, in February we were going Griffin who?
Yeah. Or like I we got, like obviously Kodai Senga getting hurt, that was the big thing.
That
But
was a
then
big thing too.
but
Yeah,
then you're
yeah,
like, and also Griffin Canning. Oh no.
yeah.
Like, you know.
Well, it's gonna be a winter that's gonna be really fascinating to watch because there's so much work to be done, and yet there's a lot of numbers there too. There's a lot of arms coming back, so you think, do they really have to sign somebody? I personally, I'd like to see him get Ranger Suarez. I think he's solid. He's a workhorse. They need somebody like that that gets a lot of innings in for them,
Innings
and
eaters, 100%.
you know they need that. He may be a good influence on a kid like Peterson if they don't decide to trade him, but I don't think they will because I think he was the pitching staff in the first half of the season.
Yeah, and honestly, Peterson just looked like he got, I don't know if he was hurt or not hurt. He didn't get any surgery or anything in the offseason, nothing that was announced, but he did look tired. And,
Yeah,
they used him a lot, and that happens.
yeah,
That does happen. You
yeah,
have to, we can rag on these guys all we want. We're like, oh, David Peterson let the team down, blah, blah, blah. Everyone got hurt. Like
yeah.
he
It's
was
a
trying,
drag.
man.
Yeah, yeah, and as you were saying at the beginning there about the pressure and he saw these guys going down and going 4 innings and 5 innings, so he probably felt like he had to go 9 innings every time he went out there, and
He
it's
did.
got to
It
be
felt that way.
yeah, it's got to weigh on you mentally and all. So hopefully he'll come back and they can. He may not have the magnitude or the mental I don't not capacity. I don't know what the word is, but maybe he's not a number one guy. You know what I'm saying?
But you shouldn't need David Peterson to be your number one. That's the problem.
No,
Like, and then I think, you look at him and you're like, that's a completely serviceable 3-4 guy. And you need those.
right, right, right. Unfortunately, sometimes this team has 14 3 or 4 guys and
Right. It was a staff
no
full
number one and two.
of
Yeah,
number three pitchers, It's like, all right, everyone's a back end of rotation. Um,
yeah,
and those guys are great. Like that's literally no disrespect. It's an important role on a team,
of
but it
course.
also you can't. I don't necessarily think you can blame an athlete for being who they are when they were 100% clear who they were. Everyone knew who they
Right,
were.
right, right, right. Well, as I said, it's going to be an interesting winter and off season, and I hope we can talk again. And I just want to thank you for taking time. I know you're busy with SNY and Newsday and all of that, but
I'm all over the place.
well, we'll be looking to see you on SNY and wherever you may be, all over the place.
All over the place. It was nice talking to you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thank you so much. Take care
All right.
now.
Take care. Bye.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for interesting baseball talk, opinions, and history.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for barbecue recipes, tips, and interviews from the world of barbecue. If you like baseball and if you like barbecue, then tune in to Baseball and BBQ. Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and BaseballTalkRadio.com.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Laura Albanese, the beat writer for Newsday. And hopefully we'll have her on again. We're going to try to get some more guests on over these winter months when the weather gets cold and the baseball gets talked about on the hot stove. So keep joining us right here at Mets Musings. Mets Musings podcast is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you subscribe as well. You can also use the players at MetsMusings.com to watch the video or to listen even. The audio version is there as well, so check it out. And that's going to wrap it up for this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll be back again. And until next time, remember, keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets. And I'm Gary Mack, and I'll see you again real soon on another edition of Mets Music.